see. But our next topic, we want to talk about the trade deadline this week. And for this particular topic, emphasize some, young players that you're looking at toward the deadline. So, Joel, I'm going to start with you here. Who's a name or multiple names, it doesn't matter, that you're going to take a close eye at toward the deadline?
I think the two players that come to mind are players that are disgruntled with their current situation. One of them is Bones Hyland. I'm curious to see where he lands. He's going to get traded. I know he is. I just don't know where yet. Is that Minnesota? There's a possibility. Bones Hyland is good, man. I really like him a lot, and he's definitely a spark plug. But for Denver, he just doesn't fit. And Denver right now, they have championship aspirations. Offensively, they have everything figured out. Their main thing is defense, and Bones Hyland is one of the worst defenders in the NBA, and that's why he has lost his minutes to Christian Braun in the lineup, because Christian Braun is a 6'6", 6'7" wing who can defend, hit shots, and he's very energetic. The other name is Saddiq Bey. I want to know if Saddiq Bey gets traded. He's a player that has a reputation for being this 3-and-D player, although he's not that. I wonder if in a different situation and or environment, he'll be a better player. And I was recently looking at this Vando for Obi Toppin mock trade.
Yeah,
Jared Vanderbilt on a Tom Thibodeau team is a perfect fit. I mean, there's no way he gets less than 25 minutes per game. He's the perfect Tom Thibodeau player. He's a winning player. And Obi Toppin somewhere else can thrive. He's a 16-8 guy. He hasn't been able to get consistent minutes because Julius Randle's playing over him, and rightfully so. But Obi Toppin's a good player, and he can get a good chance somewhere else to thrive.
Obviously, for my Timberwolves, you got a few guys. Probably the most notable is somebody like Naz Reid. Do the Timberwolves try to lock him up with an extension? He's probably going to command $10 million a year. About, is that worth it for the Wolves? I think it definitely can be. There's obviously questions. How much does he play though? With that, like, he's going to have to play a lot of power forward to play like 20 minutes a game, which is what you'd hope he's playing at least if he's making $10 million a year. But yeah, they also have, Towns and Gobert for probably the foreseeable future on that squad. There's a lot of teams interested in Naz Reid, I've been hearing. He's a really nice young just player in general, a ton of upside. He sometimes can play like a big center. I do have questions when it comes to, him playing against other top bigs in the league. But I think he's a perfect like sixth man, like off the bench center. And I think he could thrive with a ton of teams in this league. And he's probably something I'm really looking at. Obviously I'm a Wolves fan, so that makes it even bigger. But, him like Jalen Noel. Yeah, Naz Reid, I'm interested to see what happens with him.
I would be so disappointed if Minnesota dealt Naz Reid at this point. I would be so disappointed. Like, when they made the Rudy Gobert trade, y'all, I thought this was like their full commitment to cap hell. When you trade for Rudy Gobert, you don't start getting cheap. That's the one thing you don't start doing, especially when you sign Cat to over $40 million a year, $50 million a year, right? You don't start getting cheap then. Minnesota better extend Naz and D'Lo. I'm not sure how that fit is long-term. You kick it down the road, you figure it out. I think you can't make a decision on Naz Reid when you don't know if Cat and Rudy are going to work. Because if Cat and Rudy can't work, then you trade Cat and then you get the assets back, younger assets, and put them around Ant, McDaniels, Naz, little core, right? That's what you do. You don't make a decision on that right now. That's one. Number two, I agree with Joel. Can you remind me on your picks again? Why am I forgetting?
Jared Vanderbilt, Obi Toppin, Bones Hyland, and Saddiq Bey.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So Jared Vanderbilt, that is the guy I wanted to talk about too. Another team I would really like him at?
Where?
I would love him at Indiana. I think Indiana would be such a good fit. They got multiple first-round picks this year. I think multiple next year. I could be wrong there. Deal one of those first-round picks. Put a Jared Vanderbilt piece next to Tyrese Halliburton. I think Halliburton would maximize his limitations offensively. And defensively, that's another scrambler you have around the Miles Turners and the Buddy Hields and, players of that nature, Tyrese Halliburton. I would love Jared Vanderbilt there. And Obi Toppin, I think in Utah, that'd be interesting next to Lauri Markkanen. With Jared Vanderbilt in Utah, the only reason they're trading him, I think, is because of Walker Kessler. If Walker Kessler wasn't this good right away, I don't think we're having this conversation right now. But because of their floor spacing limitations, it doesn't really make sense to have those two on the floor together. And for my picks, another names I want to look at what James Wiseman does in Golden State this week. Golden State has to pick a path, y'all. They got to make a decision, right? they had these young players that they hope to create this quote unquote San Antonio Spurs timeline. It's not working. They're effing it up. They messed up on the draft picks. We can admit it, right? Moses Moody, I like him. I think there's an NBA player in there, but his slow-footedness in the perimeter has been a problem and a reason why he hasn't been in the rotation consistently. Jonathan Kuminga looks like a piece. James Wiseman, number 2 overall pick. You pass on LaMelo Ball. You pass on Tyrese Halliburton. You passed on a handful of players. That was a whiff. So Golden State has to make a decision. I think if they were smart, they would package him and other stuff and try to get a Jakob Pertl or somebody in there, at this point in time. So where does James Wiseman end up? I would love him in San Antonio. I think that is the perfect spot for him, especially under Greg Popovich. He would get reps there with a lot of room for failure, which I think is important for him. I think that's why he hasn't developed in Golden State. So James Wiseman is definitely the main name I'm looking at outside the guys you mentioned.
I think that we look at the Warriors and everybody always says package the young players. I don't think any team looks at Moses Moody and James Wiseman as desirable. I think that they don't think they're very good NBA players.
Mm-hmm.
They're not playing in Golden State after Golden State basically cut half of their depth. This was a year they were supposed to all come in and play valuable minutes for them, and they have not been able to crack the rotation. So for me, I think that teams don't think a Wiseman is desirable. He's been sent to the G League multiple times, and that's alarming. And Moses Moody was supposed to be a 3-and-D player, and his defense is suspect at the next level, and his shot is not consistent enough. So for me, I think it's going to be tough. I think the only player teams view as desirable is Jonathan Kuminga, and the Warriors have made it clear that he is one of their untouchables for now.
Yeah, I'm still looking back at this draft class, and I'm so confused. I said it a lot before the draft even happened. I don't understand why the Warriors took Wiseman. Like, look at any of their championship runs the years before. They never had a dominant big man that they really needed like that. Why did you take LaMelo Ball? You could have easily got that all-star type guard next to, Stephen Curry for the long term. He's still like 21 years old. But it hasn't really worked out at all for Wiseman. He only played 3 games at Memphis in college and then missed the rest of the year. That was an obvious red flag at the start as well. I don't know. I'm so confused from that at the start. They've always been able to win championships with just picking up like these okay centers, and because you have all this perimeter talent where they can make the centers better. And I mean, yeah, it would have been cool to get some all NBA big man, but it just didn't make sense from the jump. And I don't understand why they evaluated Wiseman as a higher prospect than LaMelo, because I'm assuming they did. But they just weren't as really spot to pick for fit based off of how they've won in the past.
The all could have been Warriors draft selections are LaMelo Ball over James Wiseman, Franz Wagner over Jonathan Kuminga, and Alperen Şengün or Trey Murphy over Moses Moody.
Yeah.
It's that's a great point, Joel, because that's what's amazing, right? I thought those draft picks was the Golden State Warriors almost feeling themselves because they knew these kids are raw. They're not stupid. They knew these kids were raw. They knew these kids needed maturity, but they thought they were so confident that they could implement their skills, their culture into these kids, into these freak athletes and make them like in these crazy, well-rounded monsters, right? That was what those picks were about. They thought they could implement what LaMelo Ball and Franz Wagner had into freaks and Kuminga and Wiseman, right? That is their mistake. That is their mistake. So crazy looking back, because that's where the Warriors messed up. They didn't lean into what made them great. They were taking high skill, high IQ players. When you look at Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, obvious, right? Those guys were not known to be freak athletes coming into the NBA. And it's interesting that they didn't consider that element when drafting these kids. They thought it was their culture. And I think that is a tough lesson the Warriors had to make. And you talked about it. I don't think Wiseman and those guys are super desirable as well. Crazy how we went from talking 2 years ago about like, can they trade for Joel Embiid for the number 2 pick, right? And then it turned into, well, could they get Miles Turner? And now it's like, who wants them? 3 into the 3rd year. I still think if they package something on top of Wiseman, maybe a first-round pick and something else, they can still get a, Jakob Pertl, but that's the ceiling to it, which is really disappointing considering that context.
Yeah, that's true.
Guys ready for next topic?